Hi, welcome to the Introduction to Hermetic Tarot webinar. I'm Candace Stella, and before we dive into this mini lecture, tarot lecture, I just wanted to give you a little background about who I am and what I do. I am a Wiccan priestess as well as a ceremonial magician in the Golden Dawn tradition of self-initiation. And for the past 15 years, I've also been doing business as a massage therapist. And after all of these years, I decided that I wanted to move into doing some more spiritual work. So I drug out my tarot cards and I drug out my astrology and I started doing readings again for people after having not done them for several years. As well as I began teaching ritual magic lessons and classes to a group of women that I work with here locally who have been through my Fundamentals of Ritual Magic class already in my living room, and they are now starting their first degree initiation into their Wiccan practice with me. So as part of my personal magical practice, I guess you could call me a bit of a reconstructionist in that I am fascinated with the ancient world and its magic traditions, particularly the Eleusinian mysteries of ancient Greece. I consider myself a priestess of Hades and Persephone, as that particular mythology has been with me all of my life. As a result, one of the other things I specialize in is underworld mythology and underworld ritual facilitation for mind-body integration, which sometimes includes my bodywork therapies and Reiki sessions in combination with ritual healing facilitation. I started doing a few of these customized underworld healing rituals for women here locally who were in very great need of them. And in the process of doing so, I began to realize how much of a need for that sort of thing there really is, which is what has inspired me to consider developing that practice a great deal more in the near future. So I'm a little bit of an oddity in that I'm sort of a hybrid also between being a Wiccan pagan and being a ceremonial high magic practitioner, which is not all that common, maybe a little more common now than it used to be a decade or so ago. But some Wiccans and high magic magicians, as a general rule, don't really get on that well due to the fact that they tend to have a lot of personal biases against each other for various reasons. For myself, I like to think of the two magical streams as both the right and left brain of magic, and I think that the biases that people have towards each other in those two camps don't really serve any greater good. So in the classes I teach, I've attempted to be a little bit of an antidote to that problem because I think that the two different styles of magic really do have a lot to offer each other. Why is this important, and what does it have to do with my classes, and particularly this tarot webinar? Well, in my observation over the years, with only a few exceptions, the quality of instruction in Wicca and in some of the tarot classes I've attended has lost some really important elements which originated in the older Hermetic and magical Western mystery traditions. Tarot in particular has become a really popular New Age art form for a lot of people who do not necessarily have a traditional occult background. The angel or the oracle card reader relies a lot more on intuitive and inspirational guidance from the images that they work with in their tarot decks, and the spiritual life coach relies heavily on more of the modern techniques in self-help psychology, while they also augment their coaching sessions with a variety of different tarot decks and their ability to read them. All of those things are really important, but it's important also to remember that authentic tarot contains a very vast knowledge base encoded within its images, which is being lost in some of the teachings now in our modern New Age and progressive metaphysics. So I personally like to bring a little old school back into my classes from the last turn of the century, which was the era when the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Theosophical Society, the OTO, Gardnerian Wicca, and other similar occult movements and groups were experiencing their full glory back in that time. There was some really good stuff to be had back then, and I just don't want to see it go by the wayside. So that older knowledge base that I speak of consists of understanding how astrology, Kabbalah, and alchemy primarily, in addition to Pythagorean theory, sacred geometry, and numerology, have played an important role in understanding what traditional tarot imagery is all about. So I was first trained as an astrologer as a teenager, so I can really appreciate how useful astrology is in enhancing a tarot reading. I've noticed that a lot of ceremonial magicians in the high magic community, who are very talented and a whole lot more advanced than I am, do not actually utilize astrology hardly at all in their magical practice or studies, which is kind of a shame, since it offers so much in the form of extensive understanding of a magical system such as the Golden Dawn system. Not only that, but astrology as a divinatory art really enhances your tarot reading skills if you pursue it. Astrology used to be really trendy and popular between the 1960s and the 1980s, a lot more so than it is now. Somewhere around the 1990s, traditional tropical astrology gave way to Hindu astrology, which became quite a bit more popular, mostly due to the difference in the mathematical calculations that are used to calculate a horoscope with, because the Hindu system actually makes provisions for calculating the movement of the precession of the equinoxes, which is believed to be a much more current and accurate method of making the horoscope calculations now in our modern times. From the perspective of a Wiccan, or from the perspective of a beginner occult student, I can also appreciate how intimidating learning astrology and Kabbalah and alchemy can be, and I understand why a lot of practitioners in Wicca primarily choose not to pursue that, because it seems to be really confusing and overwhelming and far too technical for the average Wiccan to use or digest for any practical purpose. And this is something that I've heard from a lot of Wiccans who just don't have any desire to learn any of that stuff at all. So this is kind of why I've developed a curriculum for learning tarot and ritual magic that incorporates small digestible pieces of these more technical sciences, which are found in the ceremonial magic arena primarily, and which have been left out of most Wiccan traditions of teaching. So what I have found in a couple of the classes that I've already taught is that after students have been exposed to the information in this particular way, they tend to become far more engaged and a little more fascinated in learning the material, and they begin to show a great deal more interest when they can see how useful it potentially is for them. I've also created a very strategic order in which to present the information dispersed throughout a variety of my classes, beginning with my Fundamentals of Ritual Magic class, which is the foundation class for most everything else that follows in terms of ritual magic. I did it this way so that students who would like to pursue a more well-rounded education in these topics can begin to see how all of the different occult sciences, meaning, again, primarily tarot, Kabbalah, astrology, and alchemy, primarily start to develop and integrate with one another into a bigger and more complex system of occultism that becomes a great deal more holistic. And you really need to learn the beginning level of each of those things first in order to make sense of some of the more advanced classes I'm going to teach in those topics. So there's kind of a certain order that I've designed to learn these things in for those individuals who want to pursue those topics. I started to build my online platform about 1.5 years ago when I was halfway through the production of my Fundamentals of Ritual Magic program. I had invested in a website hosting platform to the tune of a couple of $1,000s, and I experienced halfway through the process of getting my class produced, I experienced a really stressful series of unfortunate events which shut me down both financially and physically for the entire year of 2018. I lost a lot of my original material. I lost all of my original videos that I did. I lost my website. I lost my hosting package, and as well as everything I started in the way of online production of that class, I lost a lot of the material I was working on. So I'm still in the recovery period, and I'm still working in a little bit of a climate of chaos at the moment. So it's been really small steps for me, one day at a time, to get my class, my website and my classes back on track again and back online. This is the reason why the Ritual Magic class, which is designed to be a 12-month program, will not be launching until next year, probably sometime in 2020, because it's going to take some time to recover it and get it back up online. It's a really massive class to produce. In the meantime, I decided to go ahead and start with something that was a little easier to produce and that wouldn't take so long. And that is my Introduction to Tarot class, which this webinar is promoting here. So I intend to have the tarot class up and running and accessible to you on the website, hopefully by sometime in the next few weeks in July. In contrast, the 12-month ritual magic class, which is an entire year's worth of study, is going to have to be put on the back burner as a longer-term goal while I continue to rebuild. So it was one of those trial and error things that I had to learn the hard way, and in watching many of these other entrepreneur content marketing business webinars, which are basically how-to lectures on how to create online courses, I've heard a lot of stories about how some people usually have to fail once or twice before they really get their platform running properly, and that most certainly has been the case with me. And the only reason I mention it is for those of you who I already have a history with in my previous classes, in person and online. I wanted to extend the sentiment that I really appreciate your patience, and I certainly appreciate your support while I'm starting all over again. I know that some of you have been waiting very patiently for a while for me to pick up where I left everybody hanging for a time. Without any further delay then, I'm going to start talking about the major highlights of little bits of tarot wisdom that I wish to share with you today in this free content portion of the tarot class webinar. And then at the end of the webinar, I will give you some insights into the online course and how you can register for that class at the end of the lecture. So there's 5 highlights that I want to cover in the webinar today. You're probably going to want to get yourself a notebook in a few minutes. If you need to pause the video, go ahead, because you might want to take some notes. So the 5 highlights I want to cover today are as follows. The first one is going to be about the difference between oracle cards and traditional tarot cards. The second highlight is going to be about the 4 elements and the 4 suits of the tarot and how it relates to the Tree of Life, which is the Kabbalah. The third highlight, I'm going to give you some tarot tips for how to give a more effective reading. And number 4, I'm going to give you a couple of ethical guidelines for dealing with some of the controversial cards in the tarot deck. And number 5, I'm going to give you a few quick tips for giving some closure to your readings so that your client can have kind of a complete reading experience from you. These 5 highlights I'm hoping are going to help you give your clients a more holistic and integrated experience of a tarot reading, which will help them feel complete and satisfied with the results of their reading. And it's also going to challenge you to be more creative in your readings and hopefully to begin to think outside the box a little bit and start to use some of your own intuitive gifts more than you possibly have been to date, especially if you're just beginning on your tarot reading journey.